cried out for fear. But straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me to come out under the water. And he said, Come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the winds boisterous, he was afraid. And being beginning to sink, he cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth out his hand and caught him, and said unto him, O thou of little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? At this time, I still had the lawn care company doing that, but my pastor at the time gave me the opportunity to be a missions coordinator at the church. Part-time, I was over communicating with all of the missionaries across the world, and also the logistical things of getting mission teams over to wherever we were going, whether it be the Dominican or Zambia or Europe or wherever they went. I was over doing that. And I really loved the job because I was able to sit in the comfort of the church and see what God was doing across the world. I saw what the missionaries were doing. I communicated with them, and I went to visit many of them. But I was able to do it all from the comfort of the church. So just like Peter in the boat, God was telling me to go out. I needed to step further out of my comfort zone, because God usually works and is most evident when we are out of our comfort zone. He is able to show himself strong when we are out of our comfort zone. What this story doesn't tell you is there were other disciples in that boat. They were able to see exactly what was going on. But Peter is the only one that was able to truly experience God's saving grace, or Jesus' saving grace on that water where he was sinking. So God was calling me to step out further and trust him. So at the end of 2017 is when that stepping out of the boat experience would come to fruition. We were going through a missions conference at our church, and part of the text that we used was Acts 16, verses 6 through 10. It's part of Paul's missionary journeys. It says, And now when they had gone throughout Phrygia and the region of Galatia, and were forbidden of the Holy Ghost to preach the word in Asia, they were come to Mysia, and they essayed to go into Bithynia. But the Spirit suffered them not. And they, passing by Mysia, came down to Troas, and a vision appeared to Paul in the night. There stood a man of Macedonia and prayed him, saying, Come over into Macedonia and help us. And after he had seen the vision, immediately we endeavored to go into Macedonia, assuredly gathering that the Lord had called us for to preach the gospel unto them. I grew up hearing many times that, I'm just sitting here waiting on God to open up a door for me. I'm just sitting here, I'm just waiting on God to show me. Well, hardly ever do we see that in Scripture. And we especially don't see that here with Paul. You saw where he actually went up to tried to go to two different places sharing the gospel. You'd think, he's sharing the gospel. Why wouldn't they let him go? Well, it said the Spirit suffered him not. And then he went to this other place over here to this part. And the Spirit said, no, not there either. And then finally, he had a vision of where to go. The door was open for him to go to their third place in Macedonia, and that's where he was supposed to go. So God was speaking to me through this. Basically, you need to get up and do something. You need to stop waiting on me, and you need to do something. In Proverbs 16:9, it says, A man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directeth his steps. There's a key thing that we have to be doing for him to direct our steps. We have to be stepping. We have to be moving towards Christ, and then he can direct our steps. He can navigate us just like Paul was doing. He was going towards Christ. He was going to share Christ, share the good news, and the Holy Spirit showed him where to go. So we were able to spend the year of 2019 in Zambia ministering with a missionary couple in Chapada on the Eastern Province. How that came to fruition is after God showed me that with Paul, I contacted a missionary couple that we supported through our church and said, can we come and spend a year with you? We did what we called a learn and confirm trip. Went over there to learn from this missionary couple that was seasoned on the field, that had been living there for about 10 years at that point, but truly let God speak to me and to my wife that that's where we were supposed to be, that we are supposed to be on the mission field full time, because it's hard enough to move across town, much less move your family across the world. And I wanted, just like God had done previously, I wanted him to confirm in me that that's what we were supposed to do. So as our year in 2019 was coming to an end, the missionary that I was with and I taught one last pastor's conference in Lusaka, which is the capital. We used the book of Nehemiah as the topic for the conference. God used this book, Nehemiah, to teach me that serving him sometimes, and as we can tell, the way our world's going, most of the time, is not glorious in the world's eyes. Nehemiah, the book of Nehemiah, Nehemiah has been living in the king's palace. He was a cupbearer, which was a very important position in the kingdom, but he had no worries of himself. He had 2 jobs. He had to eat the food and drink the drink before the king to make sure he didn't die. That was the only thing he had to do. He had everything worldly that he could have ever wanted at his beck and call. He lived in the palace, but his brother Hananiah and some other men came and told him of the sad state of Jerusalem. And as soon as he told Nehemiah, he fell on his face and prayed to God. Now, I don't know about you, but many times when I hear of a problem, that's not the first thing I do. I start formulating a plan in my mind to fix it, as many of us men do. And a lot of times, you can ask my wife, she hates that, because as she's telling me a problem, midway through, I start trying to figure out how to fix it. And many times, she didn't want me to do that. She just wants me to listen. But we do that same thing when we hear about problems, not just in our home, but in other places. But Nehemiah, in Nehemiah 1:11, it says, O Lord, I beseech thee, let thine ear be attentive to the prayer of thy servant and to the prayer of thy servants, who desire to fear thy name and prosper. I pray thee, let thy servant this day, and grant him mercy in the sight of this man, for I was the king's cupbearer. Now, he could have easily done this and went on about his life. He could have easily prayed, Lord, I need you to do this in Jerusalem. I need you, I'm asking you to do that. Because remember, he had a good life in this palace, every worldly thing he could have ever wanted at that time. But the Lord gave him a burden for the city of Jerusalem, and more importantly, specifically the walls around the city. But instead of merely praying, he risked his life by petitioning to the king to rebuild the walls around Jerusalem. In chapter 2, verses 1 through 6, it says, And it came to pass in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of Artaxerxes the king, that wine was before him, and I took up the wine and gave it unto the king. Now I had not been before time sad in his presence. Wherefore the king said unto me, Why is thy countenance sad, seeing that thou art not sick? This is nothing else but sorrow of heart. Then I was sore afraid, and said unto the king, Let the king live forever. Why should not my countenance be sad, when the city of the place of my father's sepulchres lieth waste, and the gates thereof are consumed with fire? And the king said unto me, What dost thou ask? Make request. So I prayed unto God in heaven, and I said unto the king, If it please the king, and if thy servant be found favor in thy sight, that thou wouldest send me unto Judah, unto my city of my father's sepulchres, that I may build it. And the king said unto me, the queen also sitting by him, For how long shall thou journey be, and when wilt thou return? So that it pleased the king to send me, and I set him a time. So often we pray expecting God to do all of the work. Nehemiah got up from his knees, stood to his feet, and did something about the need at hand. Remember, a man's heart deviseth his way, but the Lord directeth his steps. We have to pray if it depends all on God, but work as if it depends all on us. God expects us to do the possible and trust Him with the impossible. So just like anything, in chapter 4, you see where the enemy appears. You can always be certain when God's work is being accomplished, the enemy will appear and come against us. The enemy will ridicule us, try to discourage us, and try to strike fear in us. And I think that's something that we all know very evidently in the world today. During our year in Zambia, about 6 months of the time, my wife was sick with basically an inner ear vertigo type issue. And if you can imagine, we drive about 90% of the time off-road, and then having a vertigo type issue in that case. So a lot of the times she was just not able to go out because when we would make a trip out to the village and back, sometimes she would be down in bed for 48 or 72 hours trying to get her bearings back to where it would go away. So not knowing the answers about what was wrong, because we didn't know it was a vertigo inner ear type issue at the time. She went, I can't tell you, numerous times giving blood, there in Zambia, and as you can imagine, the health care system there is not so great. But we were still trying to find. We'd have it sent to South Africa to find out what was going on, but we just never figured it out, and felt several times like coming home just to find out what was going on. But if we would have done that, we would not have had the opportunity to go to the southwestern province to see this ministry that we are now going to be a part of. We would not have let God be able to speak to us when we went there. We would have just missed it. So God showed me through the study of Nehemiah a lot, but most of all that he was the right man in the right place at the right time. But more than anything, he was willing to serve even if it wasn't bettering himself. There was a story originally in my, when God was going to show me about Zambia. It was in 2014. We were going to go on a mission trip to Zambia, ironically. And it was in November, and the leader of the trip, he likes to extremely over-prepare you for it. So it was a November trip, and we started training, in March. We were doing 3 different conferences while we were there. So we started in March trying to find out, to train on what was going to be happening, who was going to be preaching what, and everything like that. So we started. I asked off work. I was working at the dealership at the time, like I told you. You don't just get 2 weeks off of work when you work in that type of environment, because it was only me and another guy that did what we did. And but they let me have off, so I was like, okay, well, here's an open door. I kept going. I raised the money to go, which God provided fairly easily. And it came up to about 2 weeks before the mission trip. And it was when Ebola was in Africa. I mean, you probably saw it all over the news at that point. And my boss came to me and said, with the crisis over there, he's like, I can't tell you can't go because I've already let you have off. But once you come back, if you decide to go, you have to take off 30 days without pay. And at the time, I had just bought a house. It was gutted. I was redoing it. And I really didn't have the finances to be off 30 days without pay. I was single at the time, like I told you before. And so I had a really big decision to make. And I decided at that point, I was like, almost basically, I know you've showed me I needed to go, God, but I'm not going to go. And so I decided not to go, which put a, burden on the other team members, if you could imagine, because I wasn't able to do my part. So they went, they came back. Obviously, nobody got Ebola. And about 2 weeks later, 2 or 3 weeks later, my grandmother called all the grandkids to her house. And my great-grandmother had died probably a couple of months before. And she handed us all a check and the amount of that check was within $100 of what I would have made in 30 days. And at that point, I knew that I had failed. I knew that I had failed God. I knew that I had failed the team. And I knew more than anything that God knew what was going to happen. It's not that he didn't know that my boss was going to come up to me and say that, but he had already made provision of how he was going to finance that other money that I was like, well, what am I going to do? That formulating the plan in your own mind before you really pray about it. And and I look back on that, when I quit my job in 2000, a couple of years later, I said, well, God, I don't know how you're going to provide. I mean, I literally was mowing one guy's yard when I quit my job. And I was like, well, I guess you provided then, so let's see what. Basically, I was challenging God, kind of like Peter did when he, well, call me out on the water. I almost did the same thing. And God provided. And now we're moving over there full time, relying on God to provide the finances for us. I mean, I can't physically have a job in Zambia because it's illegal. They'll deport me. And so we rely on other churches from back in the States and individuals to support us in the mission that we're doing. So what we're going to do right now, I've told you a little bit about ourselves, but I'm going to show you what it looks like to be a church planter in Zambia. So go ahead. So this is one thing that we noticed real quick when we got to Zambia is that we had missionary Zambian partners that they would go out with us to translate. We had our language teachers and stuff like that, but their kids weren't really. They would go out with us, they would come back, but they weren't really doing much of anything. And a lot of the times that even in America, the pastor's kids are overlooked. They're like, oh, they know the gospel. They're saved, obviously. Their dad stands up on stage or stands up and preaches every week. So I gathered them all up. There was about 15 of them, and we went through a discipleship process. We started with salvation. I did not assume any of them were saved. I made them write out their testimony, just like I would be a disciple, somebody back here in town or in the States. And through that, it took us about all year to go through those. There's like 18 lessons that our church has. Through that time, 6 of them came to the assurance of their salvation, that they weren't saved, that they realized that they didn't have a relationship with Christ. So go ahead. This is what a typical just Bible study out in the village would look like. That's about probably an hour and 30 minutes to an hour and 45 minutes out of town in the village. So that's how we did it to begin with. We lived in town of Chapata, and we drove out to the village 4 days a week to do ministry. So that's what a typical Bible study would look like. Go ahead. This was my wife's ministry. Another thing we realized is, I know when you do a mission trip and go to wherever you go, most of the time you do a VBS. You do a vacation Bible school for the kids. Well, we come to realize that that's great when mission teams come over and do that. But most of the time when you leave, the kids really don't have anybody to teach them. The missionary there is concentrated on the men planting the churches. Well, my wife, before we were married, she was a children's director at the church that she came from. So she basically took what she knew and implemented it there. And you can see the ladies to her left. She not only was teaching the children, but also teaching those women how to do it. Because that is a sustainable way to do it. Obviously, if we didn't know at that point she was going to be sick for half the year we were there. So when she was not able to go out, these other ladies were able to continue it on. And the villages that she started the children's ministry in, even today, those women are still continually teaching them. And they just take what they learn from Sunday morning, service and stuff like that, and implement it in the children's lives. Continue. This is just another one of the villages. If any of you have been on a mission trip and you go out to the village and drive up, the children are something that you do not have to worry about them coming, because they will be chasing your vehicle as you driving to the village. And they do it all, every time. Doesn't matter how many times we drive up. They will running after you, going to see, not only to have the teaching, but just to be a part of what was going on. Go ahead. And this is a men's conference that we had. Obviously, there's a makeshift shelter out there. There was at this one there was more men that showed up that was able to fit in the church, which is not a bad problem to have. But go ahead. This was another thing that my wife, she didn't learn how to cook. I made that statement one time, and it kind of sounded like she didn't know how to cook to begin with. But she did. But it's obviously different there. You cook everything from scratch. You don't have anything. You go to the store in town, and you have the only thing boxed is like cereal, and there's only two kinds: Corn Flakes and Rice Krispies. But that she basically has, it's called rape. It's a type of cabbage, but she learned how to cook from scratch. She made her own maple syrup. She made Pop-Tarts for me one day, and by that I say one day because she said it was extremely difficult. So she hadn't made them again. She keeps promising me though. But go ahead. And also she was able to pour into the ladies there. The way that the culture is in Zambia, so if we were sitting in a Zambian church, all the men would sit on this side, and all the women would be on this side. Doesn't matter if they're married or not. That's the way they sat. So it was hard for me and other missionary men to go out and truly pour into the lives of the women because of just how their culture is set up. So Mandy and Miss Kim is our partner's wife, is go out and teach the women and truly pour into their life. Teach them how to be a godly wife. Teach them how to be a godly mother. And just generally teach them in a way that we as men cannot. And it's a huge blessing that she does that. Go ahead. These are Bibles that we sent over. If you can go to the next slide. This is how we sent them. We sent them in a 55-gallon drum. You can fit 330 of those Bibles in there. And you say, well, can you not buy Bibles there? You can. So that's like a English Bible that you buy from the Dollar Tree. It's about $1.50, $2. That same Bible in Zambia would cost you between $8 and $11, just because it's imported, and everything that's imported is extremely expensive. So we was able to ship Bibles over to let us give them out more freely than if we paid $10 or $12 a piece for them. Go ahead. Okay, so this is the chiefdom that we're going back to. It's called the Nyawa Chiefdom. It's 20,000 square miles in size. So to kind of give you an idea of how big that is, if you take the state of Tennessee and cut it in half, that's 20,000 square miles. And there's 510 villages, roughly 75,000 people. Obviously, there's not a census in the village, so it's a guesstimate, basically what we see on an average of how many people per village. And as of right now, there's only been about 65 of those villages with our partners that they have been to and physically shared the gospel. Now, there obviously have been to more villages, but to truly go in, share the gospel, the saving grace of Jesus Christ, they've only been able to do that in 65 of those 510 villages. The main religion is tribal worship out in the village. What that means is they worship their ancestors, but they also have a very heavy witchcraft and voodoo presence there, and you can tell that most of the time. Each village has a witch doctor that's in the village, and we see that even daily. We get news and stories of people dying from the witch doctors just because of, that is what they've known for centuries, is to go to the witch doctor. You say, man, that is crazy. Why would they keep doing that? How many things do we have as American churches that we've been doing for generations, and people on the outside looking in, man, that's crazy. Why do y'all keep doing that? It's just what they've known. So that's what, we try to break them of that, but it's something that they've been doing forever, and so it's hard to do that. Go ahead. So this is the map of Zambia, and the little blue blob is the actual chiefdom. Like I was saying, it's 95 miles from north to south and 210 miles from east to west. Our far goal is to not only train the pastors, train the churches with pastors, but also train missionaries to be sent out from those churches. Because you see, obviously, there's several bordering countries. You have Botswana. The little finger that comes in there is Namibia, and then you have Angola to the west. And to train those men to go out into those neighboring countries, because it cost me as a Westerner $100 every time I crossed that border, and hours of paperwork. But the Zambians can cross the border just like we do states. It doesn't cost them anything. They have a little card. They go back and forth, and it's no problem. So we train those men to be missionaries. You know, the local church there is no different than the local church here. We are to train people to go out, and that's what we do with those. As of right now, there's been 12 churches that have been planted in the past about 5 or 6 years since they've been there. But that's obviously with the logistics of that chiefdom, there's a lot more to do. Go ahead. And this is how we plant a church. You see we show the Jesus film, and we go in, we're invited every time, just because we don't press anything on them, because if we force ourselves in, they're just going to reject you. So we are invited in, we show the Jesus film. After that, we give a clear presentation of the gospel. Many times, just like, you know, any time you share the gospel or share the word doesn't return void. There's people that accept Christ as their Savior. Go to the next one. And then we start, if we're invited back again, which normally we are, unless for some reason the head man of that village is, you know, into witchcraft or something like that, and, you know, we may not be invited back. That has happened, but it's very few and far between. We started Bible study during the week, basically starting from salvation, starting from the basics. You know, who is Jesus? Who is God? You know, what does that even look like? The further we go into the chiefdom, the more rural it gets, the more they just have not heard anything of Jesus. So we start that, all the while looking for that man that's to be a leader, maybe of just the Bible study, or maybe even potentially to be the pastor of the church. We have a training process that they go through and continue. This is another just a Bible study that we have in the village. And go to the next one. So the man to my right, his name is Charles. He's in that, or he was in that training process. And this is their little makeshift shelter church that they had. You know, he was able to start leading the Bible study on Sunday morning, and eventually start preaching on Sunday morning for their service. And then go to the next one. And this was actually when he finished the process of being a pastor and their commissioning ceremony of that church. Now, when they come to us and, hey, we want an actual church building, because that's very important to them, as it should be. And we tell them that we have a certain number of bricks that they have to bake and truly make their own bricks. Once they're done with that, we have a builder come in. That's Zambian, because obviously not everybody can build a square building and it stand. And that's what, so we do that, but all the while, the people of that church are helping that builder build that church, because we want them to have basically bought into what's happening. We want them to have skin in the game, because if we're ever called away from the mission, this will still continue. This will still be sustainable because they built it, they did it, and they'll take care of it like that. We do raise the money from churches in the States to put the metal roof on, because they would just never be able to afford that. But the man standing there is Charles. That is the same guy from the previous picture in the commissioning ceremony of the church itself. Go ahead. And obviously, I'm sure like y'all are aware, the clean water in Zambia, you see it on TV numerous times. You know, clean water in Africa. Zambia is no different. And we try to sink a borehole at every church location, simply because when we do that, we give them the opportunity to minister to their own village. not only with water, but when obviously you can see all the ladies at the well. And they come and they're able to truly minister to them, not only physically, but spiritually as well. Go ahead. And these are just little toys that the kids make. I mean, they reuse everything. They reuse all kinds of things. Water bottles. You see an oil can over here on our table that they made a little toy out of. Use paper bags to make soccer balls. I mean, it's just, they reuse everything. Go ahead. And that's Victoria Falls. I was talking with Austin about that and how much he misses that. But yeah, I mean, it's just a tourist attraction that's in Livingston, about 2.5 hours from where we live. And go ahead. And these are what you have walking around. They in Livingston and out in the somewhat out in the village, but you have those walking around with giraffe and zebras and hippos and stuff like that. Go ahead. And this is how you can keep up with us. We have our email, Facebook, YouTube, website, and everything like that. You can actually go to our website, and I have a link on there that says "See Us from Space." And it'll take you to a Google Earth to where it'll show you. I'm working on getting all 12 of those churches on there, but you can actually go to it and see an aerial view of where those churches are located out in the village. But that's what I had, Austin. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys again for coming and sharing that. They're going to say a little more in the main service. We've got about 20 minutes before main service, so get some coffee. Choir, if you want to go ahead and meet back there and get started, we'll see you in about 20 minutes.